Hi! Recently, like a week ago, I published a video where I talked about how one of our customers was able to locate replacement push button switches that are used on the switchboard assemblies for remote stations on a certain segment of NuTone intercom systems. Those systems include, starting at the beginning, NuTone IM2003s, NuTone IM3003s, IM3303s, and IMA3303s, and then finally NuTone IM4006s, IMA4006s, IM4406s, and IMA4406s, and these systems cover a time period from 1984 through roughly the end of 2010. The remote stations for these different systems are all interchangeable within the basic model number. So a remote station for a 3003 can also be used on a 3303 or an IMA 3303. The 2003, there's only one remote station. It's only used on that system, so there is nothing to interchange it with. But for IM4006s, IMA4006s, 4406s, and IMA4406s, all the remote stations for all of those different versions are all interchangeable. If you had a IM4006 that was installed in your house in 1989, you can use a remote station from an IMA4406 from 2008, and it will function perfectly right. In that first video, which I'll put one of those pop-up things right here, little tags that pop up, which you should really go watch that video if this interests you because it gives you some basic background information. In that video was a very general video about how my customer came up with the switches, and I show briefly how you can remove the old switches from a board and solder the new switches in their place to rebuild the board to get rid of that scratchy sound that you get when the original switches are really dirty and worn and need to be replaced. And this is a new thing. Up until now, no one has ever come up with replacement switches that I know of. This is going to be a somewhat more detailed video because one of the things that you have to understand and you have to follow is if you're going to replace the push button switches on your switchboards for your remote stations, they have to be orientated. Orientated, is that a word? They have to be placed in the correct orientation. How about that? To make sure that they function correctly. If you put them in upside down, then your remote station's not going to work correctly. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you figure that out, or actually I've already figured it out, and all you have to do is follow what I do. We're going to begin at the beginning of the product line, which is with IM2003s, and then we'll talk about the 3003s, 3303s, and finally the 4006s and 4406s, because these are a little different than these other two. They're all different. They're not the same board at all, but this has a unique thing on it that the other ones don't have. So let me go ahead and move these out of the way, and we're going to look at the board for a IM2003. So this is the switchboard out of a remote station for an IM2003 system. What do we have here? Very simply, we have a circuit board with a volume control, and we have two push button switches. The first push button switch here is the monitor switch, and the second switch here is the talk switch. It's very simple. These switches are actually, each of these is actually somewhat different because the talk switch is a standard push button switch, so you push it in and hold it down to talk, and you let go, and it pops back out. You can hear it pop back out on its own. This one is a latching switch, and if you push it, it latches down, and if you push it again, it pops back out. So it's permanently on when you push it down, and when you push it again, it pops out and turns off the monitor feature. So this is a different switch. It's a latching version of this switch, and in this video's description down below, that part that no one ever reads, but if you need to order one of these, I will put the part number for the latching switch so you can order the correct ones. And to show you how much I think this is going to be a popular thing that people will want to do, here's a sack of the Momentary Contact Switches that I bought. I bought 250 of them. because they're available now, and of course we have this sort of worldwide parts shortage thing going on, the whole supply chain problem, and that way we have lots of them, because also I have a lot of boards to rebuild. I also ordered a smaller quantity, these, of the latching switches, because again, these won't be as used as only one on each of these and on another board also, so this will be enough for the time being, and I don't think the demand for these is quite as high, so I ordered a smaller quantity. Anyway, when you go to put these in, you have to put them in the correct orientation. First you have to get them all back in the bag. Alright, so we'll take one of these out, that's a latching switch, and we'll get one of our momentary contact switches out. So this one is that switch, and this one is that switch. Now, these switches have 6 contacts on the back of each switch. There's 3 pins on this side and 3 pins on this side. And the way they fit into the board is they either go this way, or you turn them 180 degrees and they can go that way. They will fit onto the board either way, but one way is correct and the other way is wrong. It's backwards. So how do you know? Well, the way I know is because I sat down yesterday and I very simply, with a meter, measured the contacts on the back of the board to see what connections are being made when the switches are in their at-rest position, this one in the out position, this one not being pushed, and then measured again with that one latched down and this one being held down while it's being pushed. And I very simply made some really quick little drawings that show the connections. This is for the monitor switch. In the at-rest position, you have these contacts that are connected, and when you push it down, the red lines show how the connection changes, and I did the same thing for the talk switch. So then I was able to put the switches in, and then the new switches in, and then measure it with a meter again to verify that's how it still worked. And fortunately, the thing that makes this easy is, if you look at the new switches, on one side of the body of the switch, and you can maybe see it right there, there's writing and marks on it. And the other 4 sides of the switch, there's nothing. It's blank. So the writing or the marks are how you index the switch. So here's the 2 switches, and you can see the writing on the one side of each switch. So when you go to install these switches to replace the original ones on the circuit board for your remote station on your IM2003 system, if you hold the board like this, so the volume control is on the left, all of the writing that's printed on the board is right side up, so you can actually read it. It has a board number here, 37798-2A. It says 26-4. Here it says speaker, here it says speaker, and then we have switch 1 and switch 2. If you can read those by holding the board this way, the markings or the writings on the new push button switches, see if we can get this so you can see it. I think you can see that. The writing on the switches here and here are up, facing up towards the top of the board, like this. And if you do it this way, the buttons will, when you push them, will make the proper connections and the remote station will work correctly. If you take these out and flip them over 180 degrees so they're upside down, then they don't work right, they're backwards. So you got to do it this way, like this. So writing goes up just like the writing is faced up on the board itself. Very simple to do. Now we're going to move up the product line 1 level, and we're going to look at the switchboard assembly from a NuTone, from remote stations that are used in a NuTone IM3003 system, or in a later IM3303 system, or the last version, which was the IMA3303 system. Now it just occurred to me that I should also write in here that these switchboards would also be used in a NuTone IM3103. There is no IMA3103. The IM3103 is not a system that you see very often. It has the built-in answering machine, a telephone, and all that kind of stuff. It didn't occur to me until just right now that there was another system. So same time frame, same remote speakers, just a different master station. This is the switchboard out of a remote station for any one of these. Boards for all of those remote stations have a volume control, 3 push button switches, These are all momentary contact switches, not latching switches, so they pop in and out as you push them. And there are 2 capacitors. I show in the first video about changing the capacitors, and this was actually the board that I did for that video. And these have all been soldered in place. These, when you put the push button switches in, which are these, it's the same switch that's used on the board for the 2003 system, and you have the markings on it just like I showed you before, and you do exactly the same thing. If you hold the board this way, so the volume control is on the left, and all of the writing is right side up so you can read it, different board number 37799-2C, speaker, you've got a diode, some resistors, 2 capacitors, which are down at the bottom like this, not upside down, and the switch numbers are switch 1, switch 2, switch 3. It's the same orientation. The markings on the body of the switch, right there, or right there, face up. So you can see them facing up towards the top of the board. If you put them in this orientation, this board will work fine. If you put them upside down, then it won't. So that's that one. That's very simple. So we'll put that out of the way. And now we'll move to our last board, which are the remote station board for NuTone IM4006, IMA4006, IM4406, and IMA4406. And this is the switchboard out of that. This is a little more complex of a switchboard than the other ones because you do have a volume control here. You have 4 push button switches. You have a relay here, and no, the relay does not ever go bad. You never need to replace it. I've been working on 4006s since they came out in 1986, and these don't go bad. These are high quality relays, and they don't do much, so don't worry about that. You've got 4 diodes, a couple resistors. Diodes don't go bad. The resistors I've never seen go bad. So you're really just dealing with the 4 push button switches. The first switch here, which is switch number 1, is again a latching switch. This is for the privacy feature on a remote station. So if you push it, it locks down, and you push it again, and it pops back out. That's privacy. Down is on, and out is off. So that's a latching switch, and then these 3 are momentary contact switches, so you push them down and they spring back up. Listen. Just like that. So you have 3 of those. These orientate exactly the same way as the other 2 boards, with the writing on the switches facing up. Here, 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 and here. If you put them in this manner, this board will work correctly. How do I know that? I know that because I made little diagrams of each and every switch on the board, and I marked the connections in the at-rest position, and I marked the connections with the button in the active or push down or latch down position, and I made one for each switch and put them in, the switches in accordingly, and then double check them on the board again to make sure that with the new switches the connections were the same. So it's been proven out. There will be an upcoming video where I take boards like these that I've rebuilt, and I'm actually going to put them in my shop speakers that I use when I work on people's intercom systems for the final testing after we've done the repair. Those speakers get a lot of use, probably a lot more use than what you get on your remote speakers in your house, because one, I've been using the same remote speakers for probably more than 10 or 15 years, and the buttons get pushed a zillion times every week, it seems like. The buttons and switches in those test speakers are actually pretty worn, and I have to clean them fairly regularly because they are worn. That's not great. It's annoying sometimes, but I'm going to replace the switches on the boards in those stations and then show you when I test someone's system how they actually work correctly. That's sort of the ins and outs of the details that you have to follow if you're going to replace the push button switches on your remote station boards. I hope you found this interesting, and maybe for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.